everyone. Good evening and welcome to the second edition of Pedia Online Poetry Festival, organized by Ideas in Progress in association with Padasala and Cambazine, titled Polyphony of Global Voices, Readings of Poets in Praxis. Thank you all for being here. My name is Deepak and I'm the presenter of today's session. Pedia Online Poetry Festival is an attempt to explore the versification practice of English poets of the day. In the 7 sessions in the second edition of the event, we have 7 poets in focus who shall be listened to, and we have young scholars and faculties joining us who shall carry the conversation with those in focus. At the outset, let me introduce the 3 organizations that have come together to make this event possible. Ideas in Progress, an organization that had been engaging with the society for over the past 20 years, helps to bring about spontaneity in expression by kindling the aesthetic sensibility within through a creative process. They open up opportunities to engage with artists from various fields, including poets, musicians, painters, sculptors, film and theater enthusiasts, to share, nurture, guide, and motivate creative engagement. It thereby attempts to fill the ideological vacuum by spurring original thought in a critical endeavor. In collaboration, we have with us Padasala, which is an informal collective of friends at Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, which was formed in 2015 to inspire, engage, and involve the academia with the society, thereby trying to bridge the gap formed due to differences of varied kinds. Our focus is on academic engagements, and therefore our target is creating bright minds. Yet another collaborator is Cambazine.com, which is an independent bilingual online platform for connecting Canvas to the community. It helps students and educators by providing the latest news, resources, and reports on university matters, assists learners in forming collaborative alliances, and provides a valuable resource bank for the exchange of information, ideas, and best practices in academia. Now, let me introduce the curator as well as the chair of today's session, Mr. Chandramohan. Chandramohan Satyanathan is an Indian English Dalit poet and literary critic based in Trivandrum, Kerala. His accolades include being on the shortlist for the Srinivas Royaprol Poetry Prize 2016 and a fellowship at the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa. His book of poems titled Letters to Namdev Hassel 2016 was on the shortlist for the Yuva Puraskar of Sahitya Academy. Let me put on record our sincere gratitude to you for having made this event possible. I also take this opportunity to welcome you to interact with the poet in focus, unfurling his poetic journey, its philosophy, politics, and method to us. Before we begin, a few quick housekeeping guidelines for this webinar. The poet in focus will first read out his poems, and then the moderator shall engage in a conversation with him. While they are in conversation, participants can ask questions using the chat feature of Zoom. May we also request you to maintain your audio and video on mute until or unless asked to unmute. On behalf of Ideas in Progress, Padasala and Cambazine, may I thank you all once again for joining us today. I request all participants online who haven't joined the WhatsApp group to join so that we could make this festival of poems continue. We look forward to your participation in this and future sessions organized by us. Now, it is indeed my pleasure to introduce and welcome the poet in focus of the day, Mr. Soni Somarajan. Soni Somarajan is a poet, copywriter, editor, and content consultant whose poetry and writings have featured in anthologies, magazines, and newspapers in India and abroad. An alumnus of the University of Iowa's IWP Advanced Poetry Seminar 2013, Soni is the creative head at the Quarantine Train, a poetry collective. He who was diagnosed with limb girdle muscular dystrophy after he finished school, called poetry cathartic. He has an uncanny linguistic deftness and an extraordinary insight into the human condition. We are indeed honored to have you with us this evening as a poet in focus at this 6th as well as the penultimate session of season 2 of the Festival of Poems. Thank you for joining us, sir. Over to you. So you're on mute.
Mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I think the format will be like first Soni can read a few poems. After that, we'll get into a discussion.
Yeah. CS, I will read a couple of poems first, and then intersperse it with the questions. I think that will be quite comfortable. Yeah, sure. Like I said, thank you to Padasala and Ideas in Progress and the particular campus. I couldn't get it quite clearly.
Campusine.
Campusine. Yes, Campusine. As in magazine and campus, right? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. So, such a privilege to be here today. And when Chandramohan invited me, and it is such a privilege to be with him, a friend for a long time, and a huge supporter for me, and largely instrumental in helping me write my first book and for having motivated me. So I cannot forget, Chandramohan for doing that for me. While coming to the collection, First Contact was published by Red River in September 2020, and I think while for a lot of people, I think 2020 has been momentous in terms of what I would say is something totally indescribable, both as a tragedy as well as a learning experience for a lot of us. And I think 2020 also helped me to finish what was a long pending manuscript, and helped me to fine tune all the time available was, kind of off from work, helped me to finish this and bring it out into the world. So without much further ado, I will go to the first poem from the collection. And this poem is particularly dedicated to my mother. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah. In Amma's Arms, this poem is called Inammas Arms. And this is from a time that tries to imagine the time when I was born. And there is this photograph of her holding me in her arms, and I am a just born. And the expression on my mother's face, and I was trying to make sense of what it was. And this is probably what she must have thought. So this is how it is. In Amma's Arms, where rain and fruit trees perfume the air, there is the wonder of life. It shows in how we look at each other, a language ripening every year when monsoon checks in. She looks dazed by what she holds. This life has asked her so very easily to be what no mother's ready for, to serve its plan as many times before, promising her that it's the future she holds. If you were a stranger to our reigns, seemingly infinite, you would first watch it lash on, then grow impatient as it sings from a bottomless throat, while you might wonder, like my mother, about having to stay home forever. So that's the poem. I read one more. So this poem is called Guava, the fruit, okay, the guava. And this poem is actually part of a larger series called The Fruit Trees. So basically, First Contact is a sort of autobiography. and in poetry. And in fruit trees, I try to talk about the large, or rather the large amount or the large number of fruit trees that were there in our ancestral home back in Kayamkulam. So one of the poems is about a guava tree, and I will read that poem. The guava. For its smoother skin, the guava tree by the well could have been mistaken for a woman under a spell. To think not of that afternoon is to forget my first stirrings, that soft step into an alternate world, where one's climbed is full of words to higher branches, a shimmer of light. To a chorus of crows, I climb, dreamlike, into a cobweb of light. That days on high, an unearthing of wings, ripening of fruit, flight beyond reason. It's taken me years to speak of it, the radio silence, a compelling primer of how a child turns into a man. So that's the poem. Chandramohan, do you want me to read one more, or is there a
Yeah,
favorite
maybe
poem of yours?
you could read one from the alphabet series. Sorry, the Malayalam letter
Okay.
series.
Acha. Is there anything particularly that you would like?
Yeah, I like the way you, I don't know, look at the letters, the careful calligraphy in the way a letter is like written in
Yeah.
Malayalam, and the curiosity with
Yeah.
which we would look if we were, even if we are Malayalis, we look at it with certain, I don't know,
Yeah.
certain
So
exotic.
just to just to give a short background, this
Mhm.
particular poem called "Learning Malayalam" is actually a series of poems wherein I have taken Malayalam alphabets and tried to give them my own meanings, as in how they look, the letters actually to you when you are a little child. So I think I will read the particular sub poem called Cha. Cha is in the Malayalam letter Cha. And so you can imagine the letter, alphabet in your mind while that. So Cha. This shell-shaped translucence, leaving a silvery trail, the story we carry. This feast of green spurning gravity, the acrobatic tremble, heedless of danger. Do we not see the jealousy of the vine, growth squashed by the slowest of living? Out of nowhere, a startling insight, a hummingbird, its beak painted in sunlight. What remains in this sanctum of the present? An ooze of leftover memory, the fractured holes of a mollusk.
This could be the very first time somebody has attempted poetry on the calligraphy of Malayalam letters. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Also, I would say that this book, this is one of the highlights.
I could say that this happens to be one major poem in this book, and has also taken the longest time to actually write also. Because I remember the first letter that I tried was R, and I wanted to, kind of just write one poem, and then I realized that I could write so many poems using so many of the alphabets. And once I started writing, my method was to link it to some of my familiar memories, and in some cases, I had to go back in memory, and with enough, I mean, though it was difficult at the beginning, while I was trying to connect the letters shape to something which was similar in my memory, finally, over a period of time, I was able to, or rather successful, to get those memories which I could describe with this particular letter. So yes, it was very exciting to do this particular series, and I had to literally stop myself from trying more. I think I've tried 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, 7 alphabets actually.
Yeah, I believe there are like 56 letters in Malayalam. Is that true?
56.
Yeah, 56. Maybe I don't know. I used to like imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a very
It would be like
interesting.
interesting if, a poet whose first language is English, he attempts poems on the calligraphy of letters of his mother tongue. And there is a, very unique perspective.
Yeah,
Like,
my unique perspective, as you are calling it, would be the fact that uh, my father was in the Air Force. Just to give this a background, so I started my studies outside the state in Air Force schools and Kendra Vidyalaya. So I did not learn uh, the Malayalam alphabets, when that is how the way we do it when we are, all of us did. But I wasn't lucky enough to learn it right beginning. So what happened was that I remember it was sometime in third standard or fourth standard. We had come for vacation, and that's when my mother sent me off to a neighbor to actually learn the alphabets. And I remember that uh, there was this home, there was this neighbor, and this uh, you know. Somebody I would call an elder sister actually. So she was the one who was teaching all the children. And so the ones who were with me were literally starting out on the Malayalam alphabets. And I was sitting there from fourth standard, actually sitting with them and trying to learn and trying to, kind of draw the alphabets in sand, how we river sand, which we use, isn't it? So I was trying to draw it out and learn the alphabets. So at that point of time, because of the slight exposure from outside, which I already had, and having been to a zoo and all that, so when I saw these letters, when I saw the alphabets for the first time, I was not thinking like a 3-year-old. I was thinking more like, for somebody who is in a fourth standard. And I was trying to find the similarity between it and things in the world, which I had already seen. So Ah struck me like an elephant, and Cha, kind of struck me like a snail that was on a plant. So, and Ka seemed like Ka looked like a battle tank. So, so I was going back to these memories and trying to, capture this. So, this is actually a poem for someone who was not initiated into Malayalam at the right age. So, while it is my it is my regret that I couldn't learn it further, but for right through I was not able to kind of study Malayalam, though except for the fact that I was for a brief time I learned the alphabets as such, and then I taught myself how to read Malayalam, but I still cannot write, which is something I regret. So this is the background of this series actually, and this is my kind of tribute to my mother tongue as well.
that's great. Like you had your like first book this year, like 2020, and that too, like like I believe you've been writing for at least like say 20 years or so, isn't it? So like how do you look at yourself as a probably as a late bloomer, or as as somebody who has really taken his time with this writing, and then waited
Yeah,
for waited for it to
yeah.
mature and yeah.
When you use the word late bloomer, Chandramohan, I remember a classmate of mine using this word to describe me when I was somewhere around 35 or something. You know how everyone is busy until 35, 36, and then everybody starts to come back together again. School friends get back together as the initial parts of their busy parts of their career start to, kind of settle into a nice rhythm. So at that time, I had started also writing poetry. Though I first started writing poems in 1991, but there was a long break. Then I again wrote some poetry in 2000, at the turn of the century, at least for a year. Then I stopped again. And then I started writing regularly from 2010 onwards. And considering that this collection is very late, the fact that it's almost taken me 10 years to get this collection done. Uh, Specifically, this collection's preparation or writing started sometime around 2015, 2016. And if you remember, Chandramohan, you kept on asking me from time to time, where is the book? Where is the book? So while that helped, but still it took about nearly 5 years to get this actually into a manuscript that was worth publishing. So there was a lot of revisions, going on, and I was slowly working in something. And it's also the fact that I have a very busy job as a copywriter. So that takes away a lot of my time, and I have to find time in between in order to kind of slowly chip away and bring this about. So I don't know whether I'm a late bloomer, but this collection is certainly late. Yes, but then again, people say better late than never, right?
Chandramohan, you're on mute.
Okay, I think I was on mute for some time. Okay, so I'm so happy that this book has been received really well, and that it's considered a very unique addition to the Indian English poetry tradition. Maybe you could read some poems, so, just one or two poems centered around
Yeah.
Trivandrum city, since most of us may have in this group, in this audience, maybe may have something to do with Trivandrum. So the
Oh,
series
okay.
degrees of
Okay.
separation,
Yeah, but I also have another poem called Trivandrum itself, Thiruvananthapuram.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I could start with that one, and
Yeah, yes.
then I can also read Degrees of Separation.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. No, there are many which are based around Trivandrum, right? Even Kovalam was based in Trivandrum.
Yeah.
So unaware of ourselves, the geography where we grew up, they will come into it, doesn't it?
Yes. So it's all about the places I have lived in also. Na? So there is this cycle trip to Valley also, which we shared a long time back, if you remember, Chandramohan. Yeah. And so I will read Thiruvananthapuram. This was a poem written nearly 10 years ago, actually. But it's about wherein I actually describe a memory from 1994. So at the time when I was in college. Thiruvananthapuram. The city of crimson buildings, burning alleys, and bodies bathed in adamant sweat. The city of winding bureaucracy, melting roofs, dull fans, and misted soda pops. Watch it shake out the mothballed blanket. The last minute bask as the sun dies gently on the veranda. In the wee hours of the hushed night, a rustle, a flutter too many, curtains puffed by a draught. Under the bushy blanket, the city tucks itself, listening to gunshots of slamming windows. The monsoon's tumultuous shout as it arrives. Outside, summer's memory perches on a clothesline, like a row of wet crows listening. So that was about Thiruvananthapuram and how a monsoon arrives. And then there was... can I read this one, Chandramohan? There is one about Ponmudi here. Ponmudi, and this is from 1995. And it's called In the Hills. In the Hills.
Yeah. So it's great that you have even documented the year in which you have written, isn't it? So that's in a way.
Yeah, no, this 1995 relates to the
The
memory
time
in
you, yeah.
1995.
Okay.
Just hold on one second.
Yeah.
In the hills, lots of whoop, head spun by diesel, roads coiling. The psychedelia weans, lure of the city goes cold as death. The nip sweeps in, gears howl, clawing up highlands. Forget the plains, gorge on the clouds, let the skin split, pull the feathers out, flee Earth's gravity. So that's the poem. And you mentioned degrees of separation, right, Chandramohan?
Hmm. I think the degrees of separation is like a slightly common name for other poetry collections also. I remember Rochelle Poker has a collection, 4 degrees of separation.
Yeah. I think it is a theory that says that, isn't it? One in every four
Yeah,
persons.
yeah.
Yeah. So, so this is more like, I mean, this is a poem that talks about you love someone and you can't be with them physically, in the same city. So I try to, kind of bring the rain imagery to it and used it as a metaphor to describe it. Degrees of separation. This is from 2016. A tentative brain asks questions, silver tinged with guilt. It makes a list of places it can't visit tonight. I see your city in there. I imagine you asleep, unaware of how rain is a turncoat. There is only so much I can do. Often we dream the same dream. We do. Tonight, there's this odd chance the rain may choose to sleep in mine and wake up in yours.
So I like that how you have a very interesting turn of phrase in most poems. Like whichever poem you turn to, there is like a very that holds that holds a reader.
Yeah, I strongly believe in my approach to poetry is like once I want to write about, say, a particular memory, then uh, uh, I actually start thinking about it very intensely. I mean, it's always also there at the background of my mind. So when I go to sleep, when I'm lying down, and the period before sleep, also, I keep thinking about this. And the early morning, also, I keep thinking about it to a certain extent. So it's there, despite the work I do. So it's always there at the back of the mind. So I usually see that when it comes to this particular topic, there are two or three good lines that I get, and these are usually termed as the given line, the lines that come to you in a poem. Those lines which are like they stand out really. So once I get those two or three, I think two or three is pretty ambitious for a poem itself. So if I can get two or three good lines, then the thing is that I sit down to kind of write it. Then I am bringing in the other lines which are spontaneous. So it's basically to join these three lines that I'm writing other lines, and in the end, when I finish, I am very particular that I must finish strongly. That I should find the what do you call it, the connect, which will make the emphasis of the meaning much more, much more than what if you had to write a ordinary line or whatever. So which brings it to a close finish, and the line should entirely, or rather remain with you after your long done reading. So it was quite recently that I also heard this thing that Sachimash says that the hallmark of a good poem is to read the last line. I mean, very often the last line will actually make a poem from good to great, in that sense. So, yeah.
I have to remember that. So there was a book launch of this 40 under 40 in the year 2016 or so. So he makes on stage the comment that the way you end a poem, you can distinguish a good poet from
Yeah.
the rest.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
That's nice.
So
Not that.
it's a you are like bringing your, I mean, you have written the whole thing, but I think it is just how a short story ends also, isn't it? I mean, so I think we grew up with short stories having a twist in the tail or whatever it is or something like that. But okay, then it is not necessary that you have it for every poem that you write. But I find myself that I'm really happy when, finishing a poem when I can achieve that, that kind of a what you would call is a coup, in a coup, in the last line, sort of. So
Yeah, that end on a high note.
yeah, end on
On
a
a high
high
note,
note.
like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think in some of your poems also I see that. I mean, in the sense that bringing the truth home, I would call it. Yeah, the truth of the uh, the issue that you are trying to discuss actually in your book. So,
And also, like, do you read Malayalam, or like, are you informed? Are you like informed from the cultural tradition of Malayalam poetry, and like you write in English from that, or like you have your influences and
yeah,
lineages
yeah.
in English poetry? Like, for example, like if you're
Yeah.
from Kerala, so you have
Yeah,
this K.
not to mean any offense, but rather to say that uh, growing up was kind of not in the language at all. So but I have made concerted efforts to actually kind of read, and I mean, thanks to some friends who introduced. Some of the good, I mean, what they call, these are the poets or these are the writers that you should be more acquainted with. So, but generally, I find that, kind of when I woke up to that sensibility, it was also the same time around that I also got into it. My career actually took a turn. So, these days, leave Malayalam books, even English books, is, I think I must have told you, but I find it very difficult to find the time to read, which probably sounds as an excuse, actually. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I also generally wonder if most English poets like if they are aware of the tradition in their respective mother tongues, if at all they have a mother tongue other than their
Uh,
first language. For example,
yeah.
I used to think, how would an English poet be who grows up in Trivandrum will be informed with the kind of poetry K. I. Panikar, KGS, Sachanandan, D. Vinayachandran, Alajan Chulikada, all these people, they are still in the canon very much alive, and how people read
Mm.
them,
Mm.
and even if you're writing in English, how
Yeah.
you take it
Yeah.
in and what, yeah.
Yeah. They have informed, I mean, like the cultural landscape with their, kind of
But I have a
books
feeling
that
that
are.
mostly the kind of poetry that like we write, or like the TQT people kind of poetry. I believe we are more closer to the Western canon, or like maybe we are more closer to say
I,
some people like, yeah, isn't it?
I think in I mean at the quarantine train, since we are talking about the
Yeah,
quarantine
yeah.
train.
So people will be like
Uh,
more in the lines of, say, Akasha Dali or Arun Kulakar, or like
yeah,
those are the voices that they are
yeah.
close.
So I think there is also not just the fact that we are also trying to read Indian poets in English or Anglophone writing in English, but I think we are also looking at translations in a big way. I think, especially
Mhm.
translations from Indian languages, and I think that is something that is really big right now, and that is something I also feel that the quarantine train should largely focus in the coming times. Actually. So I think the rich heritage that we have can inform any poet, whichever language he is writing in. We have got enough behind us, a huge colossus of a culture that can actually inform our writing, is what I feel. So I think
Mhm.
while we may borrow styles from the Western poetry, it will only be to supplement what we already have as strengths in our culture.
Also, like I'm yet to meet a poet like who writes. Maybe T.P. Rajan is one who writes a good good poem in Malayalam, and that poem is like
Yes,
published in say
yes,
Madhubhumi
yes,
Weekly
yes,
or somewhere,
yes,
and it qualifies as a
yes.
good poem. And then
Yeah,
he has a parallel literary engagement in the English language, and he is a good
mm.
poet in the English language too.
Yes,
And then
yes,
he
yes,
conceives a very good poem in the idiom of the English language, and he is like truly
yes,
bilingual. I think Arun
yes.
Kulakar did achieve that, but there aren't
Yeah,
many people who do that.
yeah. You might be particularly talking about when it comes to Kolatkar, that would be Jejuri, right? You're talking about.
Yeah, Jejuri is a
Yeah,
very respected collection, right? Extremely,
yeah. Yeah.
extremely.
So that is set in a completely it can it can not get more Indian, or it could be anywhere in India, the landscape that he describes in those poems. So it even makes us wonder whether there is anything equivalent to Jejuri itself in Malayalam culture that we could actually write poems on, in that kind of probably a more of a correctional kind of poetry, say regarding crisis in Shabarimala or whatever. I mean, these are possible. These are possibilities actually. So yeah.
So there is a question in the chat box, so I can read it out to you. Does your muse inspire your writings of short poems? I noticed that the poems you read here are relatively short but impactful. What is your source of muse, sir? So there's a question from Odinye, who's from Nigeria.
Okay. The question of the muse. Yeah. I think. I don't think we can call one phenomenon as just a muse, but I think at different points in our life there are different muses. But I think for me, I am not a poet who actually writes poetry every day. Of course, I am very envious of people who can actually write every day, and I do see people writing every day. They can write poems every day. But unfortunately, I'm not that smart enough to write poems every day, to come up. And also, I think it is also the nature of my work that prevents me from doing that. But I am usually waiting, and when I get an idea, or it could be an event in my life, or a small event, or something of an emotional moment, or whatever. Those actually serve as my inspirations, and once I've struck on a memory which I can connect with something I am experiencing now, I like to use an anecdote from memory, that kind of an anecdotal poetry, to actually, kind of express what my emotions are. But largely, I think when you speak of, I don't have a single muse as such to speak about, but I certainly feel that. I feel that poetry when it comes to us has mysterious origins, and it is beyond us, and it is a privilege to be writing poetry. I consider that, and to be able to kind of to be even given a little chance to write poetry is something that I consider very important, and I feel that. Uh, uh, I would never really know where it comes from, but for that source, I remain forever thankful. And I think it is not just a human who writes a poem. So it's more extraordinarily beyond the human thing that comes to you at a particular moment in time. And if you write it, yes, I believe that you will write it. And if you don't write that idea down or write that poem, somebody else is going to get that idea and they will write about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never lost. It may be lost to you, but it is never lost to creativity as such. And somebody else will write a poem like that.
And there are some other questions if you have the time to take it. So
Yeah,
when
please,
it comes
please.
to themes, does the themes of remembrance appear more appealing than conscious thinking in a poem? Does the theme of remembrance appear more appealing than conscious thinking in a poem? The question is by Arunita.
Yeah, I feel the conscious thinking part is definitely a more difficult process too, because I feel that uh, at some point you have to let yourself go to in a certain way. There can be a certain control in the way that you write, but when it comes to imagination, you have to be prepared to take leaps of imagination or take risks actually to kind of reach places that you probably have not thought of before, or at least pursue that idea so that you can be writing as differently as possible from what's being written or what others are writing. So I think the challenge is definitely that, to be writing something new if possible as much as you can. So yeah.
Or maybe you could read a poem different from the
Yeah. Let me
the ones
just
that are, yeah.
let me just take a look.
We can read more. We can take more questions later on.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I had earlier actually read a poem about my mother. So the other two members in my immediate family are my father and my sister. So there is this poem which talks about both of them, and I'm also included there. So this is for my father and sister, which I wrote. This is about a memory. This is actually, kind of. I have this photograph which in my hand, and then I tried to work around that idea, and this is what happened. I tried to remember what must have happened that day, and I was trying to describe the rest of it. So this poem is called "The Working of Glass." Working of glass. Strip away the sepia, a demi-glaze of memory. What remains is the working of glass. Light powders to black, grey, and white. The afternoon as a young father saw it. Perhaps light carried a few ideas, a pale sky, a falling away of space, the releasing expanse that terraces express so eloquently. The children look at the camera, the boy's face tilted sideways, examining. The girl, younger, shown in that regal air, often revealing who's the apple of a father's eye. There's an overbearing light leak in the corner, blurring the water tank they stand upon. The air and the sky are waiting, communicating in a fleeting way the familiar secret. Light always conspires to further its usefulness. Memory, a ruse. So that was one. Then there is this one. This is about first love, and this is from 1989, and I think that's the year I was in 10th standard. So you know how most of the time it's like a one-way sort of a thing, and you
Unrequited love.
yeah. So this poem is called Pyromania, and this is from 1989. That night she was on fire, a luminescence nobody saw except I. Brilliant than the sun, I had to devise ways to look at her, a pinhole projector, a viewer, a filter. On the bus, there was none of this. I learned that looking away meant staring at the window pane, that veneer of glass cutting out the flare, her face a halo. She just sat there in the speeding bus of sleeping boys, as if the night reposed on her shoulders. Her gaze often rested here and there, and a wry corner would light up flames, of heat that gravitated across the aisle, toasting me now and then, gladly so. I deduced that, like a planet, I would keep paying the price of first love. Wheeling around an effulgent star all my life, I have let a part of me sear any given minute, while my insides cook uniformly. And in another world, she goes about her day, plotting her next act of arson.
So this poem has that, a very, very ending with a punch.
Yeah. You can see that it's happening during a school excursion. School excursions were always those times when you had ideas, right? Yeah. Especially you wanted to mingle with you know, your right.
That's
Yeah. So
That's true.
it's what
So
it was talking about.
I was reminded of a poem by by Derek Walcott. It is titled "The Beauty of the Light of the World," or so. It had
Okay.
this lines like, "The beauty was humming, Marley was playing on the stereo. The beauty was
Okay.
humming the chorus." Now that there are
Okay.
some I don't know. This reminds me of that poem. Yeah.
Yeah,
And also the
I think
last
it
line.
was quite recently that Arundhati Subramanian was in an interview with you, and how she was talking about the Caribbean. If the Caribbean cannot inspire poetry in you, nowhere else can actually. I mean, for its sheer beauty and that what do you call it, the very kind of the tropical feel to the kind of the islands and the beach and the sea and the nature itself. And I think. Uh, yeah, to a certain extent, I think a large part of Walcott's poetry captures those scenes, and he is always talking about egrets and the seabirds, and isn't it? I mean, like he's always talking about the sea waves.
He has an
And,
entire collection white grades. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he's
Plotting
a
her act of arson. So that's a way
yeah.
to end the poem. Plotting her next act of arson.
Yeah, that's why it's called pyromania. So yeah. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. So maybe like we can take this question.
Yeah, sure.
So the question before that was so there was a friend from Philippines. His name is Gladys Mankada. So the question is this: any favorite subject in writing your poems? What really inspires you in writing? Just want to know.
Yeah, like I said, I don't look to write poetry every day, but generally, I think uh, I, I mean, I think it is also a phase. So for the last 2 or 3 years, since I was concentrating on the book, I was more looking forward to a lot of my lost memories as a way of recapturing them. And a lot, just like Pyromania, it's actually driven by a kind of a memory of a particular moment, and I use that to develop kind of a what do you call a poem around it. And while the particular episode may just form part of a poem, but a large part of the poem itself is dependent on that to kind of. But that is how I actually kind of have written the poetry here. So while describing, I have tried to kind of bring in as many trying to experiment with poetic forms as such. So if you look through the book itself, I'm not just used one kind of structure everywhere. I've tried short poems. I've tried series. I've tried long poems. I've tried different kinds of what do you call punctuation for it, and also kind of split poems into small parts also, just as instances of certain memories, wherein trying to just capture a small moment in very few lines. So I think you will see that there is a mix of styles here. But I did really enjoy kind of writing about my memories, and I find that very purposeful for me, and I find that very fulfilling for me, especially when I'm able to capture the essence of that memory, not just the details, but also the essence around it. I mean, the larger thing, what it possibly, what its relationship with life itself can be, that sort of thing, in the larger scheme of things. So that is there. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and also there is a question by Alina Shehzad. The question is: memory has been used as a trope in contemporary world literature. What sort of memory tropes, literary strategies you normalize in your poems to amplify its aesthetic and critical appeal?
I didn't get the second part.
So, what kind of
Mm-hmm.
what sort of memory tropes or
Mm.
literary strategies you normally use in your poems to
Mm.
amplify its aesthetic and critical appeal?
Okay. But actually, I find that when I'm writing poems, I consciously, what do you call, when I start writing, there is no, what do you call, conscious strategy involved right there. Except for the fact that, like I said earlier, I wait for a given line or two, and then I try to finish with a strong ending. And then when I've written the first draft, I again look back at it and see what are the new possibilities that can be incorporated into the poem. How can I better it? Can I rewrite it? And is there, sometimes it could be that a particular poem that I've read somewhere else becomes my inspiration in terms of form. So what I could possibly use is that I could say, for example, I wrote this poem about using alphabets, right? So what I think at that point of time was an original idea is not an original idea. I don't know about Malayalam, but poetry in English, there are people who have written poems using Chinese alphabets. So when this book went for editing, that was the time when I spoke to my editor. Chandramohan knows Arjun Rajendran, right? Yeah. So Arjun Rajendran actually edited my book of poems. So when I showed him the poems, then after seeing the poem Learning Malayalam, he actually sent me what he called this poem about a series of Chinese poems written on in English poems written about Chinese alphabets. Actually, so
Which was a poem? I remember a poem in this journal poetry. There's a journal poetry from
yeah,
Chicago, right? So there is a longish poem in which there are these letters, these
yeah,
Chinese alphabets there.
yeah.
Sorry, letters there, and there are a few lines on each.
Yeah. So
Maybe.
in that, he actually doesn't use. Then I went and read that, and it does not use memory as the to develop the poem as such. What he does is that he looks at the visual style of the alphabet, and he tries to see forms in it. You understand?
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. But in my poems, I have seen the form in it, but then I've taken it and connected it to my memory. You understand? So
Hmm.
that is that is a variation on the same idea actually. So
Yeah.
for me, when I read a good poem, and I feel when it holds me as something different and striking and surprising, then I see whether I can do something like that, but on a variation of something, totally unrelated or whatever. So that can be a conscious choice, but if this happens only in my editing after my first draft is done actually, whether I can, kind of change the poem that I've already written to a more, kind of what can I give it to, what can I give to it to improve the poem actually. So
Hmm.
yeah. So there is usually I work through for a poem. I usually work through at least. I mean, for the poems in this book, I have worked through at least 6 to 7 redrafts of these poems actually. So,
I think
which
globally,
which uh, which Chandramohan strikes me as not much and not good enough, because very recently Jeet Tayil had actually was it on his Facebook or on Instagram? I don't remember. His mentor used to be Dum Moraes, and he writes about Dum Moraes' work ethic, wherein he says that he would treat his real life work as fun. Okay, Dumbo Race would treat it like that. But when it came to writing poetry, he was known to do 70 to 80 redrafts. So that kind of makes me feel really shallow.
No, like most accomplished writers give the suggestion that when you're editing is what makes it right, what makes your writing.
Yeah, editing and time, not just editing, but time. Time is a big arbiter, if you would say. And when I think we discussed about this, Chandramohan, but I feel that especially if you were to ask me what I would say to someone working on his collection would be the fact that time is of essence, in the sense that you have to be prepared to give it time. There is not, I mean, even if it takes a year later, you will still be the same age, no matter what. So the thing is that if you want to take another year extra, you feel that your work needs it. I mean, that sensitivity has to be there. And if you give it, it will work. I mean, at some point you are going to understand that you have to let it go. There is only so much you can do. But have you given it your best? So sometimes people are in a lot of hurry to do it. They want to put the book behind them because it fits a lot of real life agendas, right? In that sense. And as young as possible, write a book so you have a book to mention. But the question is, what have you achieved with that? Because that is your first collection, and you can never ignore it. History will not let you forget your first work. So, yeah. So so only thing is that the problem with me is that my first collection, I kept thinking about that, and it came so late. So that's the thing. But don't be so late. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, over to Deepak. Maybe Deepak has something to say.
I think it's time to conclude, right? We have to cross.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Soni sir. We had a very different poet here today. We've been seeing different kinds of poets over the days, but then you are totally different from all of them for the fact that you write mostly on memories. And as you have said, it is a sort of catharsis. So thank you very much for having joined us on behalf of Ideas in Progress, Padasala, and Camp Design. I put on record my sincere gratitude to you, sir. And our participants are
Thank you, Deepak. It's like I said, it's a privilege, and I am so thankful to Chandramohan for calling me over. And I was hoping to have an excellent conversation today, something between friends, sort of a thing. And I'm glad I could find it here. And my best to this community for kind of having poetry as your central agenda, and for giving it the treatment that it deserves in these times, especially, for it gives us a lot of hope. It has given us hope over the last 1 year, and it will continue to give us hope. And I think our most significant moments in history have always been defined by poetry, and we should all make sure that we can all empower that art as much as possible to give back more than what we can take from it. Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.